Let's get started then. Thank you for joining us today. This presentation is called Virtual Gaming Programs, Resources for Fighting Social Isolation with Gaming. My name is Dan Major. I'm an adult services librarian at the Orion Township Public Library. We're about half an hour from Detroit, and I'm also a board member of the Games and Gaming Roundtable.
And hello, my name is Erica Ruscio. I am a young adult librarian at the Ventress Memorial Library in Marshfield, Massachusetts, on the coast halfway between Boston and the Cape. And I am also on the Gaming Roundtable board.
And I'm Rebecca Strang. I'm a children's librarian at Naperville Public Library. I'm on the board of directors for the Games and Gaming Roundtable, and I'm also a games studies instructor at Loyola University, Chicago.
Hi, I'm Jeff Pinsker, and I'm totally jealous of Rebecca's title as a games instructor. That sounds like such a cool thing. I am the CEO of Amigo Games. We're the US subsidiary of one of Germany's largest game companies. For those of you who don't know, Germany's known for great gameplay, and the Europeans in particular make great games.
So for a quick outline of our presentation, I am going to be covering some video game resources that libraries can use. We have a great handout that goes along with this presentation that has links to all of the resources that we're all going to share with you. So definitely check that out, because anything that we talk about, you can just click on the link in the PDF handout and instantly kind of see a little bit more what we're talking about to use in your own library. I'll also talk about some best practices for video gaming programs. And then Erica is going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons mini campaigns. Rebecca will be talking about board game resources and DIY group games. And then Jeff will finish us out with talking about some trends and some happenings within the gaming industry as a whole. We will ask that everybody stay muted and keep your questions till the end. We have allotted plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. And we'll ask that you use the hand raise feature at the time so that we can get to everybody in a timely manner. You can feel free to type in chat when it's your turn, or if you're comfortable speaking on camera, you can enable your video and ask the group on video. So for gaming resources, for video games in particular, I've compiled a list of quite a few of the resources that I've used in my library for our gaming programs. We do focus on easy to access and free gaming resources. I'm in a public library, so obviously part of our service policy is to remove barriers to access. So we don't want to use games that are pay to play or that require purchase, especially when we're doing all of this remotely. People should be able to play and participate from home. You know, there's already the digital divide. They already have to have a functioning device and internet to participate, and that's enough of a barrier for a lot of people. So you don't want to have to make them buy a $60 game or a $300 console on top of it. So the resources I'm going to talk about are all relatively easy to access for most patrons. The first that I use is battle.net. This is Activision Blizzard's game platform. They include games from World of Warcraft to things like Call of Duty, which you do have to pay for. But they also have games like Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, which is similar to League of Legends, and Hearthstone. Hearthstone is an online card game. And all of these games are pretty popular kind of in the esports arena. So there's some professional level play. Young adults and teens are generally going to be very familiar with it. I've touched on a couple of these games at some gaming programs I've done, and we've had some really great outcome from it. So definitely explore that, because those games kind of do already have a high interest level, and you'll be able to attract a good audience to your gaming programs with that. The next is Magic the Gathering Arena. Magic the Gathering Arena is a virtual version of Magic the Gathering, which is a tabletop card game. It's been around for many years and is always very popular. Arena, it's basically the game completely recreated online. You get a collection of cards when you sign up. You can purchase new cards if you'd like, but you also get in-game rewards where they will give you packs of cards to add to your collection. Wizards of the Coast, which owns Magic the Gathering, they also do have a promotional program with libraries and community centers, that kind of thing. If you sign up on the Wizards of the Coast website, they'll send you some codes for digital packs and redeemable items in-game that you can distribute at your event. Minecraft and Roblox are great open world games, especially Roblox lately in our library. Minecraft seems to wax and wane in popularity, but it is always a staple. Both are free to download. You can do microtransactions in Roblox, but I do not encourage that. And they're a lot of fun for just having a server and running a free-to-play session, or having some creative challenges where you have a prompt at the beginning of the program, and you create, you have all the participants create something during the process. Mobile games that are free to play are also great. Among Us, obviously, this year has been one of the most popular mobile games. Lately, in the online gaming group that I'm in at the library, all of our patrons only ever want to play Among Us. As much as I'd like to play some other things, I let them lead, because if it's not the game they want to play, they're not going to participate. So it's important to listen to your group. And again, Among Us is free to play on as a phone app or on a tablet. I think it's like $3 or $4 if you're buying it from Steam or something like that. Speaking of Steam, Steam is a platform on PC where you can download all kinds of games. You can purchase them. Most major release titles end up at Steam at one point or another. But there are a lot of free games on Steam as well. And we at our library do have Steam on most of our public PCs, with free-to-play games already installed. So they stay popular. This is getting into a little bit of a challenge when it's something that you're doing virtually, because having to download Steam and then additionally download the game, and then additionally having to create your lobby or your group, that's a lot of steps to take, but there are a lot of popular games on Steam. And if you have something like a team group who, all just want to play this game, it's easier to arrange with them. We have a geek club that meets twice a month, and they frequently want to play games online, so we'll use Steam for that. Consoles, I'm very careful about using consoles for virtual programs, because again, it creates a dollar barrier for the patrons that want to participate, and we don't want to exclude anybody if possible. We have consoles set up in the library all the time that people can come in and play at the library. We circulate consoles too. But playing on consoles virtually, just creates some barriers. So I've done it. I think I did a Let's Play that I streamed, and it was great for that. But as far as consistent group gaming with library groups, maybe not your best choice. But there are ways to figure out cool things to do. Finally, I just mentioned Let's Plays. Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Live, any streaming service like that is really good for streaming that sort of content. When we got the promotional materials from Wizards of the Coast for Magic the Gathering Arena, I did a learn to play Magic the Gathering, streamed it on Facebook Live, and we had a really good response to it. We had a lot of views. We gave out a lot of promotional material, and it's a fun way to reach people, you know, that maybe they just have, you know, the library's Facebook, they like it, they follow it, they see that they're streaming, and they drop in for just a couple minutes to see what's going on. So it's good promotional material for the library, and it's great for your gaming groups as well. Some best practices, you know, these apply to a lot of what we're going to talk about today, but specific to video gaming programming, you want to make sure and schedule when people are available. A 1 p.m. gaming thing on a Tuesday is probably not your best bet. I've had to work some Friday and Saturday nights to, you know, work with my group, but, you know, that's a bullet I'm willing to bite because I'd probably just be playing video games anyway. So registration, our library does not require registration for most of our programs. And again, kind of creating a barrier for participation. If your library does require registration, obviously that's something you'll have to do ahead of time. Sometimes you need to email out codes and stuff like that, so it may be required, but it's best to, you know, just let people drop in when they can. Be consistent with your setup. Start in a consistent location each time you start the program. So if you're going to meet on Zoom, consistently meet on Zoom. That way people will know what to expect. Stay logged in the whole time, so if new people join you, you know, you're still there. You haven't migrated all the way over to, you know, the streaming or the broadcasting on a different app of whatever you're using. Moderation, especially with teens and kids, you always want to have an adult, preferably a library employee, in every Zoom room, in every discussion participation, just for the protection of the participants and the library. Know your platform. Get familiar with your games and how they work and how to invite people. Learn the rules ahead of time. As Jeff will point out later on, one of the hardest things about learning a new game that people don't like is learning new rules. So if people can turn to the library staff to streamline that process, everybody's going to enjoy it quite a bit more. Promotion, we work with a lot of community partners. We work with our school district who has a gaming group, and they will help us out sometimes. Some of the teams participate. There's a local game store that we partnered with for some gaming events and things like paint and takes and that kind of thing. And then stay current. Do what's trendy, do what's popular. Earlier in the year, Animal Crossing was an extremely popular game. A lot of that has died off at this point. Many libraries did set up Animal Crossing islands, which I had on a previous slide. You know, like I said, Among Us is very popular right now. Find out what's popular in your community and with your library, and, you know, capitalize on that, because the trends do change very, very quickly. And with that, I will pass it over to Erica. Erica, you're muted still.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Dan, for that awesome transition and really great, awesome video game resources. Another thing that's super popular right now is Dungeons and Dragons. And so my name is Erica again, and I'm going to talk about tools you can use to run a virtual Dungeons and Dragons program at your library. If you haven't thought of getting one started, you should. It is by far our most popular program for teens. They have screen fatigue, but not when it comes to D&D. So I'm going to be very brief about the tools we use to run a hit D&D program. And so while this will not be an introduction to how to play D&D, I do think these tools are beginner friendly. Also, my final slide will recommend resources that you can use to help you learn more. So, since transitioning from in-person to virtual D&D this spring during quarantine, we've started running mini campaigns, which is a shift from running full campaigns like Hoard of the Dragon Queen, an official D&D adventure. We made this decision because ultimately a mini campaign allows more players to cycle in because they only last 5 to 8 sessions, and they take less planning time overall. You will need time beforehand to determine the map of where your campaign will take place, describe specific locations and how they connect to each other, and plan the different encounters the players will face. However, once you have that, you will need less prep time for each session because the story will feel more focused and it will be more location-based instead of following a linear plot. So essentially in a mini campaign, there are interconnected locations, each of which offers players opportunities to move freely around the map as they fight different kinds of monsters and find loot. If you have a big bad evil guy, the players can also do some sleuthing in each location, and you can choose to have the villain find them during the last session or two. If you have eager teens who can volunteer or whom you can pay to help you develop the campaign, or who can be a dungeon master, also known as a DM, for the campaign, even better. So Dan, next slide, please. So now that we've covered what a mini campaign is, let's look at one of our key tools, D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is a third-party service that offers official D&D content from Wizards of the Coast, kind of like a virtual D&D handbook. A lot of the content you do have to pay for separately, but a lot of the stuff that you need to get started is free. And it offers a variety of tools for running a campaign. It allows you to organize campaigns, create character sheets, build encounters, and more. You can use their free version, but I recommend subscribing to Hero Tier, which is about $25 a year. While the free version limits how many characters you can make, Hero Tier lets you make an unlimited amount of characters. So also keep in mind that players will need a D&D Beyond account, and if you are working with teens under 13, a parent will need to set up an account for them. Next slide, please. So making a character is a snap on D&D Beyond. First, you want to create your campaign, which I have shown here on the left. Each campaign contains a unique link that will allow players to claim or add characters. This will allow you, the campaign creator, to see and edit all player sheets, which is useful for helping new players set up their characters or level up. Players will only be able to edit their own sheets. In the campaign description, which is also visible to all players, I like to include the campaign schedule, Discord link, D&D etiquette document, and our Zoom meeting link for ease of access. And I only send out the campaign link after my teens register on our library website, which is a necessity for our program. D&D Beyond's character creation is flexible and it has options for people new to D&D. You can choose quick build or you can randomize, or if you want to build a custom character, you can check show help text, which lucidly explains all the parts and pieces of a character sheet. But it's not just awesome for DMs. It's also awesome for players. The virtual character sheet can be accessed online or in the handy D&D Beyond app. But its true gem is the newish dice feature. Players can roll all 7 of the D&D dice directly on their virtual sheet. They can also click on a specific skill or attack or any other action they need to roll for, and the sheet will automatically add the correct modifier to the player's dice roll, which will help new players more easily navigate the more technical aspects of the game. Next, please. All right, so now that you've planned your campaign and gotten your characters ready, you can go ahead and start planning your encounter, aka pick monsters for the players to fight. You can either build encounters while referencing an existing campaign with active characters, like I have shown here, or you can just manually enter the number of characters at a specific level. You can search and add all creatures to your encounter, even if you don't own the content on D&D Beyond. You can also determine how many experience points a fight will be worth, as well as how easy or hard it will be for your players. Next slide. So now that you've planned the encounter, you need to be able to play it out. We use a tool called shmeppy.com to translate our physical battle mats to a virtual setting. For much of your game, you can just use powerful verbal descriptions, or screen shares of online maps or reference images to get a sense of place as you role play and interact. But in battle, distance matters. Shmeppy is a simple and user-friendly tool that allows you to draw two-dimensional scenes, make character tokens, and most importantly, use a grid to determine distance traveled. Next slide. So Shmeppy has two views, the GM or Game Master view and the player view. When you make a game on Shmeppy, you are the GM and you can switch between both views. And players do not need a Shmeppy account to view your game mat. So that's lowering the bar for access there, which is nice. All you need to do is share the URL in the group chat. The tools for illustrating your mat are easy to use. Simply hover over a tool and it will give you tips and hotkeys for using it. You can also use Fog of War, which allows you to hide certain parts of your map from view until it's ready for players to view it, which is what I have shown here. Players cannot change the board, but they can move tokens, including each other's tokens. So just be sure to include some Shmeppy do's and don'ts in your D&D etiquette document to avoid players stacking tokens or spelling rude words with the laser, both of which I've had to address early on in some of my campaigns. Next slide. So now you know the two main tools we've been using successfully for our virtual D&D mini campaigns. There are other platforms that exist, such as Roll20, which I also have linked in the doc, but I like using D&D Beyond with Shmeppy because of the usability and the simplicity. That said, if you're new to D&D and just overwhelmed with it all, know that especially with a mini campaign, all you need to include is the information relevant to your story. Start small, kind of like drawing a simple comic before trying to do a realistic oil painting. And remember, the internet is your friend. What you see are just some of the free resources I have used to develop my own skills and confidence as a DM. The new player's guide on D&D Beyond covers the basic rules of gameplay, and again, it's integrated right there into that really awesome resource. 2, the popular series Critical Role lets you watch D&D being played. They also have a graphic novel adaptation, which I highly recommend. 3, the Dungeon Dudes offer great DM tips and more on their YouTube channel. And 4, fandom.com hosts an excellent wiki of all things Forgotten Realms, which is one of the most common settings in D&D, and a good place to start planning a mini campaign. Well, that is all the time I have for you now, so I'm gonna high five it over to Rebecca, who's gonna now share tips for running virtual board game nights and more.
All right, thank you, Erica, for those awesome virtual D&D tips. Again, I'm Rebecca, and I'm going to be discussing board games and DIY gaming resources. So when you're starting or transitioning a game club to virtual play, some of the first things you're going to need to decide are where and how you're going to be playing. For hosting games online, two popular resources for that are Zoom and Discord. Zoom is what we're using right now. A lot of us are already familiar with it. It's a meeting space with text, voice, and video chat. Discord is more like a living community, also has text, voice, and video chat, but you can set up different channels for topics for your game club. You can do your game nights right in D&D. You can do screen share, or in Discord, you can do screen sharing. And it really works well if you want an ongoing living community to interact with your game club. And for playing digital games online, there are a lot of sites you can use for that. I have a list of some examples here, both free and paid options. When you're deciding which one you want to use, definitely keep in mind the needs of your community when you're choosing the platform, and consider which one is going to be most accessible to your patrons, both cost-wise and tech accessibility-wise. Next slide, please, Dan. You can also convert physical games to a virtual space. I have some photos here showing how I've converted a game called Second Chance, which is a flip and write game, either just holding cards up to your camera or setting up a secondary camera. I usually call it my game bot cam, that is showing the game in a separate screen for participants. And this setup works really well for roll and flip and write games. If you're not familiar with what those are, a popular example of a roll and write game is Yahtzee, where you're rolling dice and then you're making a decision usually on a player sheet based on what the outcome of that dice roll, or if you're flipping cards, you're making a decision based on what cards you have access to. Don't be afraid to modify rules to facilitate virtual play. A lot of these games with just a couple tweaks will work really well for online play, which is one thing that I do when I'm running Second Chance online. And usually with this method, the facilitator would need to own a physical copy, and players at most would just need to print a player sheet, draw a player sheet, and then have some writing utensils on hand. And if dice are required, there are a lot of dice apps out there that can be used for digital dice if people don't have physical dice that they can use. And these programs are great because it's getting that social connection. You're getting to see families play. One of my favorite things with Second Chance, in that game, you're deciding between some Tetris-like shapes to fill in a 9x9 grid. And you can see the photo of that on the screen, what that grid looks like. But when you're watching and participating in this, you're just seeing all of these families huddled together around the camera with all of their separate sheets coloring. And it's a really great way to get that social connection, even though you're in a virtual space. Next slide, please, Dan. You can also do DIY group games in virtual setting where you're creating virtual gaming spaces that are with games that are easy to teach and play. These are games that are very familiar. They can be played by a wide age range with an open player count often, and you're getting back to paper and pen even though you're in that virtual space. So some examples of games that I've done this with are Category Roundup, which is like Scattergories, Who's That, which is like Guess Who. You can also do scavenger hunts, and I have an example of an emoji game that we've done. Tools that you can use to create game boards for DIY games are things like Canva, PowerPoint, or Keynote, or you can even do it with Word Publisher or Pages. Next slide, please. So these are some screenshots of examples of games that I've built for my programs. The first one in the upper left, Winter Category Roundup, this is like Scattergories. And the great thing about creating your own version is that you can set your own time limits. You can decide if you want everybody to stick to a specific letter to start all of their words with, or just have an open category. In the upper right is an example of Who's That. This is one that we run for Pokemon League a lot. You can create the characters that you want on your board, set up some stats, which is great because not everybody knows every single little detail. So having some common stats that they can pull from for those questions is great. And it works for any fandom or seasonal topic that you would want to do as well, which is another great thing about this one. In the lower left is a slide from our scavenger hunt game. This one I really love. If you have a game club that's meeting regularly and you've got the same people coming over and over again, scavenger hunts are a great way to interact and get to know your gaming club when you're in an online space and you can't have those physical connections. Setting this up, you're just picking categories and giving them a time limit, and everybody runs around to find something in their house that fits the category and comes back and shares what they found. So it's a great way to get to know people and find commonalities and make those connections in your club. And you can do categories, like the example shown, expired condiments is always funny. But you can also do things like go find your favorite book or the biggest stuffed animal or something that evokes a happy memory or things based on color. And this is another thing that you can also do fandom based if you wanted. And then in the lower right is an example of the emoji game. This one we do for Pokemon League as well, and the kids love this. For Pokemon League, I make the combinations ahead of time and have them guess which Pokemon I'm trying to convey, but you can also turn it around and have your participants submit their own combinations and see if other people can guess. And this is another game that works really well for all kinds of fandoms or topics. And in our handout, there will be links to all 4 of these 4 templates or PDFs that are ready to go that you're free to use for your programming. And so as you can see, it doesn't take a huge game collection or even anything more than Zoom and some paper and pencils to run a fun and interactive game program. And up next, we'll hear from Jeff about some gaming industry insights.
Hi there. So I will mention that A, it's always hard to follow Rebecca. She's a fantastic presenter and has great content. But B, do you give extra bonus points for having multiple expired condiments? I think in our house, people would be showing up with armfuls of expired condiments that have all sorts of different science experiments going on inside them. Hi, I'm Jeff from Amigo Games. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what's going on in the game business right now. And this is for board games, not video games. And then we'll talk about some of the ways that you can convert some games to remote play, so you can get people involved even if they're not in the same place and they can't come into the library to take advantage of your game library. Before I do that, though, I want to mention that some new figures came out just this morning. The toy business in general, the toy channel was up 16% in sales last year, but games are actually up 29%. So games were actually almost double the large increase we saw in toy sales from last year. The big thing, of course, that we've noticed is that COVID-19 has been has totally reset the world in terms of games and puzzle use. It's accelerated a longing for nostalgia, which was already there. It satisfies this desire for quality family time. One of the statistics we came across was that the number of tweens playing with their parents increased by 72% year over year. I think that's a phenomenal number. Think about how many parents are so excited to have their kids playing with them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we're seeing more and more people driving toward value price entertainment options. When we think about our competition, we're not so much thinking about just other game companies. We're thinking about all the things that a family of 4 or 6 or 8 could do together. When they have a time to go out. And when you compare game playing to the other options, going to a sporting event, going to the movies, whatever it might be, it's a very inexpensive entertainment option. And that's one of the reasons that people are driving toward it now when they're feeling economically unstable. Libraries can play a huge role in that by providing it in effect at no charge, just by taking advantage of the gaming library that you already have. The other neat thing we're finding is that Americans are more interested in new stuff than they have ever been before. And part of that is because of supply chain issues, but also because they've played through a lot of their game library. And this 51% statistic that I have on the screen here doesn't apply just to games. But what it does show is that people are moving away from brand loyalty in ways that they never have before. About 50% have tried something new, a brand that's new or never even heard of, that replaces a brand that they know and love. But 73% say they continue with that new brand. So this is an opportunity for you to expand your patrons' horizons and really take a look at the different ways that you can introduce products to them. Another thing that we're seeing is that product quality matters more than ever. This is something that's of critical importance for you as you think about how to build out your game library. Go to Amazon, go to the other places that show reviews so that you can understand what are the great playing games. It used to be you couldn't tell if it was a great playing game until you got it home and opened it up or got it to your library and started playing it. Now you can take a look at what other people have said about it. So it's an easy resource to follow. And the last one is that a lot of the gamer games that we're seeing out there are now becoming mainstream. So don't be afraid to introduce games that are a little bit more complex to your audience. Dan, next slide, please. That said, however, I will note that the number one obstacle to people learning new games is complicated rules. We did a survey and we found that 70% of respondents said the number one thing that stops them from trying out new games is learning the rules. So one of the things, and I think I saw this question in the chat before, is you should absolutely do a rules review prior to starting every game that you play. Even if you've got people who have played before, you don't want somebody to have to stop the game to find out halfway through how to actually play it. What I've tried to do here is to capture some of the best practices that we've come up with as we try and convert our physical games to something you can play remotely. So the first one is, and you saw a picture of this in Rebecca's slide, camera angles are key. Make sure that everything you do can be seen from the camera that you have on you. You can also, and this is down below, you can also use your cell phone in addition to a camera to get you an extra angle that you may not have. So think about using that. You've sort of instantly between a laptop or a webcam, you may already have one or two, but you can use your cell phone as well as a third camera or second or third camera. The next thing to do is to make sure that you ask everyone to pin your screen so that they can see what you're doing. So when Rebecca showed you an image of somebody holding up a card to the camera, make sure that everybody can see your screen large, right? They don't want to be just a little box, because then you're going to have people complaining that they didn't see it in time. If there's a reaction game where it's whoever is the one to do something first, don't forget that you should use the chat. The chat's a critical piece because it lets you know what order the answers are given in. If you have 5 people shouting out an answer at the same time you're trying to figure out, the right camera angle, you're not going to be able to hear, particularly if it's voices you don't know, hear who came in first. So use the chat because that gives you an easy recorded image of it. Another thing that I think is very easy is you can contact publishers for resources. So many of us have put together online conversion rules. We've got training that we're happy to do with you. We also have training videos available. We also offer how to play videos. So even if you can't catch us during working hours, and our working hours extend very far these days, 2 in the morning, sitting at your desk, you can take a look at a how to play video that's typically on YouTube. The last thing is that there are plenty of different free conference rooms that you can use. We use something called 8x8, doesn't require any downloads. There's spatial.chat, kumospace.com, open broadcaster software, OBS allows you to live stream if there's something you want to do at the same time you're using one of these other spaces. The last note that I'll make is that make sure also that you've got a good microphone and good headset so that you know what's going on and you can keep up with everything that's going on. The last slide that I have, Dan, if you'll pop ahead, is just to show you an example of a couple of these different venues that we use. This is one we use for GAMA. GAMA is the Game Manufacturers Association. We built 3 rooms like this. I didn't do it, but somebody there did it. They said it only took them about 30 minutes. The 2 screens that you see at the top left and the top right are actually video screens. So those are where a video can be playing. And if you look in the front, you'll see a picture of me sitting in one of those chairs. That's what the icons look like. And it's kind of a neat feature. If somebody sits down at that table, they'll be able to hear me. If they move to one of the farther tables away, they won't be able to hear me. So you can set the range at which people can hear you. It's a pretty neat little piece of software. It's very simple. It's free up to a certain number of players. And it's a great way for you to customize something. This is actually an image of the lounge at the place we usually have our in-person conference, but unfortunately, we didn't have that in-person conference this year. One more example, Dan, is on the next slide. A very similar space. This shows you 4 different places that you could play. That's called Kumo Space. If we go on to the last one, just a reminder for why we're doing this. Next slide, please, Dan. Just a reminder for why we do this. Kids who play games with family members over-index by 34% on feeling happy all the time, and kids who play games with their friends over-index by 37% by feeling confident all the time. So playing games with people is a great way to bring families and friends to connect together, even if they aren't in the same place. And I think libraries have a tremendous opportunity to do that. All the conversions that we've done are available on our website, which is www.amigo.games. I think that was listed before, or if you can't find them, you're welcome to email me. I know Dan is circulating all of our email addresses in the handout. So thanks for that. I think the next step is to open this up for questions. I know there have been some coming through in the chat. But if you have a particular speaker that you would like to answer the question, please be sure to do that. Or you can use the raise hand feature, and Dan will recognize you, and then one of us can answer the question. Thanks so much. Okay,
so I know we had a ton of questions that we have tried to address as we were going along, some of which were and some of which were not addressed yet. Thank you, Erica, for sharing that info about the handout. We are working on trying to find out how to share our slides. So I will be talking with conference services about that. And if it's possible to share these slides, that'll come through conference services. Let's see. Actually, Erica or Jeff or Rebecca, Do you see any hand raises? Because I'm not actually sure where to find that.
I don't see any yet. If you do have a question and you'd like to speak on voice or camera, please use the handout, or sorry, the handout, the hand raise feature in the reactions, and we will call on you all. Otherwise, you can post your questions in the chat and we will look for them there as well.
We do have one question from Lauren. Best no-cost virtual board games to play with adult patrons. Rebecca or Jeff?
For no cost, Board Game Arena has a free and a paid version. If you're not familiar with board games, there is a little bit of a learning curve to using the site, but it works really well for hosting online game days. I'm a children's librarian, so I don't run library programs with adults, but I do run a local gaming group, and we meet every month to play. We meet via Discord and we play on Board Game Arena. And you can be playing at multiple tables at once. You can just focus on one game at a time. You can set up a group on Board Game Arena if you want to for your gaming group so that people who use your library can find each other easy to set up games. And it works really well, and they've been adding a lot of content to their catalog there. One caveat with Board Game Arena, if you have players who are playing on the same IP, one of them will need a paid account. But otherwise, you can play a lot of stuff there for free.
Yeah, and a lot of the publishers, the manufacturers, are actually taking their products and virtualizing them on these various spots. We use all of the ones that Rebecca suggested. One note on that, however, many of it is much like fan mail. Sometimes people have created their own versions of it. We view it as fan mail as such, so we leave them up there, but make sure that you've taken a look at the game that you're about to play on one of those venues, because they may have changed the rules a little bit. It may not be the official version from the manufacturer, which means there may be a difference. One of the decisions you'll need to make is, do you want to use one of those virtual platforms where you're actually doing a simulated sort of animated version of it, or do you want to try and host something a la a Zoom conference of what we're doing now, where, as Rebecca showed you before in her slide, you're holding up cards to the camera, you're moderating. From my experience, there's more interaction with the latter way because people can see each other. Some of the online venues allow for chat and some allow for voice. I haven't seen that many that do a great job with video. So if you want something where people can see each other face to face, that's something where, much like you would host a game night in your library, you can host a remote game night, and you can do it just like we're doing with lots of different players. Based upon the game, you may want to do different breakout rooms. One suggestion I would make also is that you do tell people as you present the game, I should have mentioned this earlier, what's different from the way that you play in real life, because you may have some people that know how to play, and if you've changed a rule, then they need to know about that. And I hope, by the way, that as you take a look at the ones that we've created, if you do that, use this as a model so that you can do that with other publishers' games as well. This isn't us just trying to push our stuff. And so many different games can do a great job. So think about the ones that you already enjoy playing in person and see if those can work in a remote setting where you've got lots of different people in different windows.
It seems like Dan's got some questions.
Yeah. And I wanted to, let me scroll up for just a second. Keith had asked about virtual gaming for academic libraries. As far as I know, everybody on the gaming roundtable, all the board members are public librarians. We would love to have some participation from from academic libraries too. So just a comment on the academic libraries. I think it does function basically like it would in a public setting. Generally, we create a Zoom room, everybody joins, we discuss what we want to play, and then log into Board Game Arena together, or get on Among Us. We create the Zoom room first, and then kind of figure out from there. I think the video conferencing is a big part of that. And it makes Among Us a lot more fun when you're looking at people's faces while they're trying to lie. So
one additional, if I can jump in, one additional resource that academic libraries may have is so many colleges these days have gaming clubs. So maybe connect with the gaming club from your college. They may already have experience in running these online and virtual games. So you can take advantage of the knowledge that they've got and see what's been successful with them, and then try and broaden that, add off of that to a broader audience.
Yeah, tapping into your student groups is a really great way to get a feel for what kind of interest there is for gaming. At Loyola, the librarian there has started a LibGuide for gaming, and there's also our Sim Lab, which is our social and interactive media lab. We do a lot of game study stuff there. So tapping into those kinds of student groups can help push the word, or utilizing your paper and putting the word out that way too.
The next question that came in about Magic the Gathering and Battle.net. As far as the platforms we run on, I am not aware of Magic the Gathering Arena on any other platform other than PC. I could be incorrect, but that I ran as a PC program. You can just create a lobby, invite people to it. You can set up a tournament. Tournaments for my population have not worked wonderfully. They kind of enjoy free play a little bit more, and that does take the pressure off of me to have to run a tournament. Same with Battle.net. You can download the Battle.net app and then download the free games and go forward and create your games, send out your invites, that kind of thing. With Among Us, we do have usually at least 1 or 2 staff members playing. The nice thing about that is it can kind of run itself once you get it set up. So if you have to step away, the players can continue to, participate or start a new game or start a new lobby without relying too heavily on staff members. I'm not a huge fan of it, so I don't know all the ins and outs of Among Us, but I get sucked into it quite frequently. So there is always a staff member playing.
We have a question from Ria, who's raised their hand. Ria, you've unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so I am a MLIS student at the moment, and my intention is to become a young adult librarian. I am not a big gamer. I've played a lot of different games, but I'm not like, I don't really have my finger on the pulse of like what's popular right now. I was just wondering if you have any pointers for people who aren't big gamers to kind of get started in this arena when it's so important to like creating library community in a lot of ways.
I think my biggest tip would be to connect with your local game store. They're going to have a lot of knowledge for you. They're going to know what's popular in the area. They may or may not have some resources they can give you. But if you can develop a partnership with them, that would be a great first step.
That's a fantastic first step. And in addition to your friendly local game store, I would also not overlook your local toy store, particularly if you're interested in children's. From my experience, the friendly local game stores do much better for the adult and the heavier titles, if you will, but the local toy store is also going to know. The other opportunity, of course, is to take, we'll go back to, I know it's a nasty word sometimes for people to use, but to Amazon. And if you look at the top 100 list, Amazon will publish a top 100 list on every single category of games, from card games to board games to strategy games. So you can also take a look at that and see what's trending that way. Board Game Geek, which somebody mentioned earlier in the chat, is also a fantastic resource. And Board Game Geek, I think, is particularly good because I think that the ratings there are a little bit more accurate than the Amazon ratings. A lot of times in Amazon, you get, oh, my package arrived, great, can't wait to play this, 5 stars. Well, that doesn't help me understand that that's a great game, even though I was promoting Amazon reviews before. You have to actually read the reviews. But Board Game Geek, boardgamegeek.com, has great reviews and really good rating system as well.
And don't forget, as 3 of the 4 of us presenting today represent the Games and Gaming Roundtable, if you're looking to talk games with people and you live in a rural area and it's hard for you to make those in-person connections, we're online. We're on Facebook, we're on Discord, and you don't need to be a member of the roundtable to utilize those resources. Obviously, being a member is awesome, but you can network virtually as well. So I'm going to share the links for those in the chat as well.
I believe, I know we had spoken about it and I'm not involved in this committee, but the Gaming Roundtable is also doing game reviews. I don't know what form that's taking, but I did stumble across it the other day. I think it was in the newsletter. So the Gaming Roundtable, you know, we do have a lot of really good resources on that section of ALA, you know, across the board, whether it's on Facebook or Discord or on ALA Connect.
And one other thing that I should have mentioned at the end of my presentation is I work with an organization called GAMA, the Game Manufacturers of America. And we are working with the Gaming Roundtable to put together a pilot program, which we will launch later this year, that's going to make direct connections between libraries and publishers. So you'll have access to publishers' resources. You'll be able to learn about how to work with those publishers and hopefully get some copies of their games at either discounted or in some cases for free. And the idea being that you would then work with them, they would help you understand how to present those games and how to turn them, in this case, into a virtual gaming experience as well. So stay tuned for that. And if you're not a member of GameRT, then I would suggest that you think about adding your name onto that so you can get information on this program when it's available. How was that for a little plug? Did I do okay?
Okay, was there any other questions that we missed? A couple people had. Oh, I'm sorry.
One about accessibility, Dan. And it's not an area that I unfortunately know anything about, but I was curious if anybody else had any for Braille or other disabled.
For accessible games, some of those DIY games that I was talking about where you're building your own board game, if you can create them and turn them into an accessible PDF that is readable by those assistive technologies, those would be a good way to go, because you're developing it yourself. So you can set it up in a way that your patrons are going to be able to use. And for things like Guess Who or Scattergories, things where it's a game with questions, is more accessible than using something like a website like Board Game Arena.
Another thing to consider for accessibility, obviously, I'm just talking about D&D programs, but I think this applies broadly. So a lot of you in the chat were mentioning Chromebooks, and unfortunately, Zoom doesn't play super well with Chromebooks. I'm in a small library, and Zoom is kind of what we're stuck with, but there are other ways to video or voice chat. Discord is one of them. It actually doesn't work as well for us, so we don't use it, but just if you have a small like recurring gaming program like I do, it's especially easy to get to know who your gamers are. And you can I ask my teens what technology they have access to, just to make sure that they know kind of what the technical requirements are. And then, yeah, if you can loan out devices, excellent. But if I've had teens in the past where like, you know, their video's not working or their sound's not working, and I always offer for them to, you know, type a chat and I will reiterate that verbally if I have someone else DMing that session. So there are ways, just figure out also what technology you need to make sure it's accessible.
Yeah, and once we're back to in-person games and you're looking at playing physical board games again, Michael over at Meeple Like Us does a lot of accessibility teardowns and reviews for board games that are incredibly useful. He and his team look at physical accessibility, you know, color blindness. They evaluate emotional and intellectual accessibility of board games. So those teardowns are incredibly helpful when you're looking for accessible board games, when you're physical board games.
somebody had, or several people had asked earlier about circulating video game consoles, which our library has done for about 3 years now. So if you are interested in seeing our policies and how we handle, damage and fines and age and all that, please email me, dmajor@orionlibrary.org, and I'm happy to share that document with you.
Someone was asking, how much should I try to herd my gaming community? Should I let it develop organically with minimal intervention? I think it really depends on, first of all, the policies for your library. For me, when I run programs, because I'm running programs with kids, we have to have 2 staff in our Zoom programs. So there's always somebody there. And because we, especially for things like virtual game night and our Pokemon League, we're interacting with every single kid that comes into that program. So we limit it to 20 participants. We have 2, if not 3 staff there, and we're getting a lot of one-on-one interaction in those programs. So we, that's more tailoring a community, not tailoring the signups, but once they're in there, we're interacting with them one-on-one the whole time. If what you're looking for is a gaming club, especially if you're working with teens or adults and you want to provide them a space like Discord and let them figure out their game tables on their own, that would be a way to provide the access and the space for that kind of community to build, but not necessarily something that you need to, helicopter or micromanage as much.
And I kind of second that. I transitioned from being a teen librarian to being an adult librarian a couple of years ago. So I tried to keep, the momentum going, the interest we had in our D&D group, in our video game group, in our board game groups. Even now that it's well established, sometimes we have 0 people show up. Sometimes, I suddenly one week I had like 23 teenagers playing Dungeons and Dragons and only 2 DMs because, a dozen new kids showed up in the same week. So, don't be discouraged if it ebbs and flows. I like to let it evolve organically, but some people are more structured than that. So just experiment and really talk with your participants and see what they like. Because if you're not doing it what they like or the way they like, they're not going to come back. But if they do like it, next week they're going to show up with 2 or 3 friends. So. Jenny asked about circulating board game collections. We did pull our board games early on when COVID started and didn't add them back to our curbside pickup. We quarantine all of our items right now for 5 days before checking them back in. So that's kind of how we've been handling that. Can I attest to anything about that? No, it was developed by, professionals, so I'm trusting that that is enough. If anyone else has input on that.
I will say, if you're wondering about starting a board game collection, we're definitely be in touch with everybody at your organization who's going to have a part in working with those games. Talk to your collection services folks, talk to your technical services folks. You want everybody to be on board with you. So talking to them beforehand to get their buy-in and to work out how circulation is going to work at your library is so important. Don't just jump into starting this collection and spending the money to get things done, and then you figure out, oh, not everybody's on board with having our circulation staff counting all these pieces. Decide how you want to do all of that stuff beforehand and get buy-in from everybody.
One of the things that we do when we work with libraries is we make sure that we focus them toward games where no single piece is critical to the gameplay. So if you need to have, we have some games where there are 36 discs, and if you lose 2 discs, you can still play. It doesn't make a difference. But we want to stay away from the games where every one of those 36 discs matters and you cannot play the game without it. For critical components, we'll oftentimes try to identify those and send extras along with it. One other note, if you do start contacting different manufacturers and publishers, be careful, because if they offer you a donation, they may be trying to get rid of stuff they haven't been able to sell. So make sure that before you approach those manufacturers and publishers, you have a sense for which games you want to add to your collection, which ones are going to work the best, and make sure that you understand the list of questions you have to ask before you bring games in, because you don't want to get games that won't work for your patrons or games that haven't been successful in the market for one reason or another.
All really good points. And I just want to reiterate too that we actually started our circulating board game collection during COVID. We had board games that we used for in-house programs. But then, one of the things that turned out really well is that because we had to make sure that they would be returnable in our book drop, we have packaged them all in really nice neoprene cases that are intended to be laptop sleeves. So it just allows for that, easy collection with the quarantining that's already been mentioned, but then they can just be book dropped like the rest of the items. And I always have a very detailed item list that matches all of the labeled bags of different stuff on the record as well. So it's a little bit of work to set up, but I have a smaller library, but as Rebecca said, if you do make sure everyone is on board, I'm sure your tech services department will be willing to help you. And if you need to get people on board, just tell them that gaming brings people together, and hopefully they'll be like, all right, I'm 100% with you.
So it is 1 minute until noon here in Eastern time. So that really is going to be it for our time today. If you have any additional questions that weren't addressed, or if you just want some more information, feel free to email any of us. We're happy to answer your questions. You can visit the Games and Gaming Roundtable on ALA Connect, the League of Librarian Gamers on Facebook, and then I believe Erica posted the link to our Discord as well a little bit earlier in chat. So thank you everybody for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll be on Discord throughout the day. If you want to have questions, we can definitely continue our conversations over there.
Woo! Happy rest of your conference, everyone. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.